is that the amount of rocket fuel you need to push tons of material or waste materials up to the speed or velocity we need to escape the gravity's, Earth's gravity is very large. That itself will cause quite a large amount of pollution. Also, the risk of if the rocket explodes, waste is all over the place, a big problem. And economically, it will be way too costly to do that. So we need to find alternative methods. There is one thing they're working on, basically making rocket propulsion using lasers, just to make sure there's no explosion also. And it's pretty efficient if it works. It hasn't worked yet. They're working on it. And if that works, of course, we can shoot the material up into the sun. It might work, but in the future, we still haven't found a method against it. At the end, we need to find an alternative method. We need energy. Of course, fossil fuels, coal, everything will work, but they produce pollution. And so it's not that good. At least the nuclear doesn't cause that. At the end of the day, if people are saying I don't want to live next to a power plant because it's may cause radiation for me, just let you know, living near a coal power station will give you 100 times more radiation than living near a nuclear power plant. The reason is because coal has thorium and uranium inside it. And whenever you dig it up and burn it, it basically radiates throughout the atmosphere. Now people have lived near coal stations and they have made minute differences in their life. But it's not a big problem. So having a bit of radiation isn't a big issue, but a nuclear power plant is actually better than a coal power plant in terms of its radiation on the people surrounding it. So that's it. Thank you.
Lastly then, for the opposition, we're going to have Michael talk, and he's going to be talking about nuclear safety and other non-nuclear alternatives.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, David. Thank you to all the speakers, and thanks to IET for having us. It's a real honour to be here, and we really thank you for coming out tonight, because we know there's a lot of places you could have been tonight instead, and we really appreciate your time. And on this particular topic, I'm going to discuss the anti-nuclear position from two different arguments that really haven't been covered yet. The first is on the waste and decommissioning, and the second, I'm going to go through the alternatives to the nuclear power, which have not yet been discussed. So just to start us off, I'm going to just show you how there haven't been different things presented. And so first of all, the waste and decommissioning. Both of the speakers have highlighted that there is waste, that's part of developing nuclear power, but unfortunately they fail to mention the cost and the money. The thing about nuclear power is that it is presented as a third way. It's supposed to be cleaner than the fossil fuels, and it's also supposed to be more reliable than the renewables. But in truth, it really falls down in these counts, and where it falls down is in waste. The waste costs an intense and a hugely intense amount of money for these nuclear power plants. What the problem with the waste and decommissioning, you'll see, it was in the 70s and 80s that the UK nuclear power plants were built. The lifespan of a nuclear power plant is around 40 to 50 years. In a sense, what's been happening is the waste has been building up. This is not nuclear waste, by the way. It's not stored in this way. Waste has been building up around us, and it's being stored on site. And it's not been made a correct solution for this. It's currently housed at the 23 sites across the UK. It's currently housed in most plants that were built in the 70s and 80s, and it's waiting for the decommissioning. The regulators always have trouble with operators of nuclear power plants because they typically don't provide for the decommissioning in their budgets. These power plants, they have over 1 gigawatt capacity, but they're talking about £2 billion per reactor. And we're also talking on top of that around £300 million to decommission. Now you're going to see this in the next 10 to 15 years as these plants have to be decommissioned before the new ones come in. And there's probably going to be a lot of surprise that the budgets weren't in place. And as we all know from the bank bailouts, when things haven't gone right, we know who has to pay, and it ends up being the taxpayer. This waste, there isn't a solution, as I say. We can't take this waste home with us. We can't take it anywhere else. So what's had to be happening with this is it's going to have to be stored somewhere, and this nuclear waste doesn't really have a storage site that's possible. Currently, this is the kind of setup that the spent nuclear fuel rods have after the process. There's around, I say, 5 times the Royal Albert Hall. That's the amount of these spent fuel rods that have to be kept. There's about 387 Olympic-sized pools of it. Again, the size doesn't particularly matter, but what does matter is that this is not going away. This is half-lives of tens of thousands of years, and the radioactivity, it's not been given a proper solution. Every politician that's come along has said, we'll leave it to another budget, we'll leave it until later. And until the decommissioning, which you're going to see happens, it's just been stored on site. So this is where the cost of £300 million comes in. This is where you're going to see the real cost, because even though it's cheaper as renewables, we have all these closing costs that have not been discussed in nuclear power. The Royal Society has estimated that if we were to enact a solution of burying it geologically to keep it safe, providing with the security so that the radioactive materials could not be accessed by, say, terrorists, by any sort of things, that would cost £85 billion. This would be an additional $3 billion on top of each reactor, which already costs around $2 billion a reactor. So the cost is more than doubled then for this power, and for that reason, it actually becomes more expensive than the renewables. Renewables, such as the wind farms, they may cost in the realm of £75,000 comparatively. So this waste is very significant. The safety issues are not really the concern. We're talking about the money here, because at the end of the day, we all know that climate change issues will only happen when it becomes the most cost effective. Certainly there's more political will nowadays, but since nuclear power has these associated, these almost hidden costs, you could say that are delayed by 50 years, we have to consider that actually in the long term, all we're doing is delaying a cleanup fee. This cleanup fee is going to offset all the costs, and it's going to add more debt. That we all know it's probably going to be the taxpayer that will have to do this. What is the problem with this? Is that it's really offset all the possibilities. And the other problem with nuclear power, if I can be so cheeky as to go back here to a previous slide of David's, he mentioned at the start that unfortunately there is the perception that electricity is the only real concern in climate change, and that's what environmentalists have focused on. And I apologise on behalf of any environmentalists that have given a false perception that that's what the real load-out and the real requirements of energy are. And I would wholeheartedly agree that electricity is a very small percentage. But the problem with mentioning this argument in nuclear power is that nuclear power generates electricity. So essentially, by arguing for nuclear power, what you're doing is saying we should just focus on the electricity when we've got transport and heating that are actually the real concerns. This is where the huge amount of spending is based. Its estimates have come at around, from the building, the 2007 buildings and data books, that 55 to 61% of the money we spend on our homes is on heating. It's on power. It's not on these lighting and things. So I wholeheartedly agree with David that this is why we need to be focusing on not electricity and nuclear power. We need to be focusing on the heating. We need to be focusing on better transport, certainly, but that's the real problems. And so then I guess we can get to the alternatives. Sorry there. The alternatives, of course. What are the alternatives then? I guess so. If this is what we end up with, if this is what nuclear power gets us, it's more cost and more wastes, then how can we possibly tackle the big parts of the energy pie chart that David's brought forward? Well, there are several things to discuss. There's tidal. Now, already in Ireland, there's around 2% of the energy is generated through tidal. You'll see this is the picture of the